Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of my 3-part retrospective on the animated Batman films that I recorded with my friends John, Chris, and Jeremy. If you haven't already, go check out parts 1 and 2 of this video. Now, a movie we forgot to talk about when we were recording this, but I'm going to give it a brief mention, is a 2013 Lego-themed Batman movie called Lego Batman the Movie DC Superheroes Unite. I've never seen this, and to the best of my knowledge, none of the other guys have seen this, but I just wanted to give it a brief mention. Now we move on to 2014's Son of Batman, which is loosely based on the graphic novel Batman and Son by Grant Morrison. And this is about Damian Wayne, who is the son of Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul, and of course is the grandson of Ra's al Ghul. I like this one. I did a review on it a couple of years ago, and I remember it being really good. Chris, you said you haven't seen this one, right?
I haven't seen it, but what I will say is I do love the character of Damian. I love the idea of there being this huge moral conundrum with him, that he was raised to be an assassin, but he's got a dad who's he's like a moral crusader, and then he's like the grandson of the Demon's Head, so he has that whole legacy to live up to. It's a cool sort of contrast between his two families.
Yeah, I like this movie, and yeah, I agree with Chris. I really do like the character of Damian Wayne, and I love how arrogant and obnoxious he is, like when he first comes to Wayne Manor, and he's treating Alfred. I mean, Alfred is a servant, but Bruce always treated him like, a friend. This time Damian is really treating him like a servant, and it's so hilarious to watch, especially Alfred's kind of snide, sarcastic remarks to him. And I just love when Damian says, "Careful, Pennyworth, I'm not so young that I don't understand sarcasm," and Alfred just dryly goes, "But I am too old to care."
I thought this was alright. I mean, it's not that I hate it, it's just was not nothing special, not like something I would watch over and over again, like the same I do with Phantasm, Under the Red Hood, or Year One, or The Dark Knight, and I mean, Damian, I guess, that guys have good points about Damian, but I just find Damian annoying sometimes. He's just I feel like he's a little shit that needs a smack in the face to saying stop acting like that.
Well, I think that's the point of his character.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. And remember Deathstroke?
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't terrible. I just think there wasn't much to Deathstroke. He just wanted to take over the League of Shadows. It's come on, this is the League of Shadows. That is impossible to take over. They've been a League of Shadows have been around for centuries, and it's like trying to go be a one-man army, trying to take down one army by yourself. That's the way I describe Deathstroke's motive in this movie. This was the first time Jason O'Mara, who played Batman, he's not bad. He's just I just don't find him that the same as Conroy or Bruce Greenwood or Ben McKenzie. He's just not my favorite. I don't rank him as one of the best Batman voice actors.
I like Jason O'Mara as Batman. I mean, he's not my top favorite, but he does a pretty good job, and it's been nice to see him reprise the role in a lot of these DC, what's the word for it called? They're adapting all the comics from the New 52. That's it, the New 52 animated movies. They're trying to keep the continuity in each of them, so it makes sense for him. But yeah, he does a great job.
I have seen the New 52 Justice League one, so I will say, yeah, he's a serviceable Batman. I've seen Justice League Dark, too. But, yeah, there's nothing really too, I feel notable about it. I do like that they sort of keeping that continuity together. It's kind of a fun thing to follow through those movies, especially if you stayed after the credits for Throne of Atlantis, you know what's coming next. So they're having a lot of fun, obviously, and yeah, Jason, he works as Batman.
I think this is a pretty good entry in the Batman animated films. And another hilarious moment I want to point out is after Damian and Nightwing have a fight. Later, Damian is criticizing Nightwing and talking down to him, and Nightwing just goes, "You lost that fight, remember?" He really puts him in his place, and I just love that because, I mean, yeah, I'm just gonna say it, the arrogant little brat was asking for it.
And also with Damian fighting Deathstroke at the end, I've just heard of this obviously, but that actually, if you're a fan of Robin. Not necessarily one particular incarnation, but Robin in general. If you're a fan of Teen Titans and stuff, that there's a huge amount of legacy that comes with that. So that sounds like a cool way to end the movie.
Now we come to 2014's Batman Assault on Arkham, which is actually a Suicide Squad movie and is actually in continuity with the Batman Arkham video games. And I liked this one a lot. I thought it was pretty good. But Chris, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, like you said, it's more a Suicide Squad movie than it is a Batman movie. And if you've played the games, as it's a fun movie, but it doesn't hold a candle to like the hours that you put into gameplay and all that stuff. But it is a cool, like, fun kind of offshoot from that whole universe. I loved Harley in it. I loved Deadshot. I like that they end up having a thing. That was kind of like a cool, unexpected bit. And then King Shark and Killer Frost. Yeah, they end up having a really good camaraderie between like two lesser known villains that I always liked, but you don't really see a whole lot and stuff. So they really nailed the characters down. And the irony is, like, this feels like a better Suicide Squad movie than the live action one.
Sure. No about that one.
Yeah, so that's my feelings on it.
I think it's very good. I just love the personality of each of the member of the Suicide Squad. And as I think the director of the movie said, there really is no honor among thieves. They're all out for their own purpose. And if they weren't being controlled by Amanda Waller, they'd probably try to kill each other so they could, get away and do whatever it is they want to do. You get to kind of be a little sympathetic to these characters, even though they are scumbags. And, especially with Deadshot, because he wants to reunite with his daughter, you root for him. So that's a pretty good part. And I also love the Joker in it, as always. I mean, I just love when he's taunting Harley as she's walking by him. And, again, that's the Joker's power of manipulation. He gets her to fire at him, which eventually breaks the hole through the wall, which helps him escape.
Yeah, I love this a lot more than Son of Batman. What I like about it, it's a great like tribute and continuity with the Arkham video game series. Even though I did play the first Arkham game, but only parts of it. I only watched the rest on YouTube. I'm not much of a video gamer. I like Troy Baker. Troy Baker his voice definitely reminded me of Mark Hamill's. It was hard to believe that it was not Mark Hamill. When I first saw this, I'm like, oh cool, Mark Hamill's back. But when I saw who was in this film, wow, it blew my mind away. I also like Deadshot too. Definitely the first time I've watched a Batman film where I rooted for the villains to get away from it, especially Deadshot.
I want to point out, CCH Pounder comes back to play the voice of Amanda Waller, and her freaking comeuppance at the end is amazing.
She gets it in the... Well, even though we don't see it, but I assume... Oh, yeah, she gets in the end.
Yeah, she is not sympathetic at all in this movie. I mean, she rules those convicts with an iron fist. And she has no problem just constantly shoving that in their faces.
And something I think I should bring up is, since we're not really going to have time to do it later, is if you really like this, definitely check out, there was another animated Suicide Squad movie that came out last year called Hell to Pay. It was really, really good, and I think kind of flew under the radar a little bit. But I love that they really were kind of continuity hounds with this one, because Troy Baker was the voice of Joker in Arkham Origins, and this takes place not too long after Arkham Origins. And I'm pretty sure Tara took over as Harley in Arkham City. So I like that attention to detail that they were like, all right, this is in one particular universe, and we do have to adhere to that, and also just flat out do a suicide story in that video game universe.
I also enjoyed who played Hin Walsh, Harley Quinn. She was pretty good.
All right.
Oh yeah, that's a good point, John. I enjoyed her too. She's got a lot of energy. And just a lot of optimism for this crazy character.
Nolan North as I love Nolan North as a Penguin. I think he's the best Penguin I've ever seen. Compared to the cartoons or the films, he was great to see him come back. And also, the one thing that kind of upsets me about they were supposed to do a sequel to this, but what happened was Jay Olivia ended up leaving Warner Brothers, and the sequel was just scrapped. I would have loved to have seen a sequel to this movie. It would have been great, but hopefully, I hope one day maybe they could do it, but if not, it would have been a great idea.
I just want to go back to the Penguin a bit, because it's such a small but memorable role. I mean, the actor Nolan North who plays him, he really makes the most of what little he has to work with, and I just love the animation for the Penguin. And I love how when we see him, he's sitting there, munching on those dead fish and ripping them apart.
Kind of like Danny DeVito.
He is not trying to be an eloquent gentleman at all. I mean, he's chewing on it. You can see the food in his mouth. Oh, it's disgusting, He's going, and it's all getting all over him.
This was almost like a victory lap for Nolan, because he had been doing Penguin since Arkham City, and I thought done what I feel is like the definitive like version of him.
Yes.
Very like fucked up, very creepy, like
Yeah.
kind of like echoing Danny's, but also doing his own thing by making him Cockney and all that stuff. So getting to see him do it in just like a straight up cartoon was kind of really cool, especially if you were like a fan of the games. Yeah.
Even if like Batman fans or people who like play or don't play video games, I recommend that you either play the games or you could like just go on YouTube and watch some other like YouTube game or like watch it, feel like you're watching like a 3-hour or 4-hour film that's very long but done very well.
Yeah, and going back to your point before, John, I would have loved to have seen a sequel to this. It's such a shame that it never happened.
I could see another animated film in the Arkham verse, though.
Yeah.
That would make sense, because I think Arkham Knight kind of capped it off really well. But there's a lot of stories in between that you could get into, stuff with like Two-Face and shit like that. That'd be cool to see.
But yeah, once again, I think it's a pretty good movie, but there's not really much else I really have to say about it. Now we come to 2015's Batman vs. Robin, which is loosely based on the Court of Owls story arc by Scott Snyder, and the movie acts as a sequel to Son of Batman. And this is another one I like, but it's been a while since I've seen it. I did do a review on it back when I first saw it. Chris, you said you didn't see this, but you have read the story arc, right?
I haven't seen this, but I really love the Court of Owls story, because it was such this great... weird ass like almost sneak attack to turn out that there's a secret organization running Gotham, and the somewhat scary fact that the fact that they model themselves after owls is symbolic, because the owl is the natural predator of the bat, and it's kind of then the whole like twist that Thomas Wayne, there might be a brother that Bruce didn't know about and all this stuff. It was really cool, and it was something that hadn't been done in a while, where like they were able to like totally uproot one aspect of the mythology. Like, who can you trust in Gotham if there's this secret organization out there? Obviously, I still haven't seen the movie. I'm sure they probably lived up to it pretty well. I love that Damian is involved, though. That sounds cool.
Jeremy, what do you think of this movie?
Yeah, I really like it. It's not a totally faithful adaptation of Court of Owls, which was a run I really enjoyed. A story arc I really enjoyed, I should say. But I think it does a very good job at taking parts of it and making it fit into this other story about Batman, trying to connect with his son. And his Damian getting seduced to, the Court of Owls. I think that's done very well. And I also just love some of the nightmarish, visions that Batman is made to go through during the film, which I think it's very entertaining to watch.
Yeah, I thought this film was okay. I mean, though, like it's not true to the Night of Owls, but it's a fair average film. It's not. I think I don't mind this film as much as I did with like Son of Batman, and I like the Court of Owls scenes, like when they're trying to like get like Damian or Batman trying to join the Court of Owls, but they refused. I read the comic a while ago. It's been a while. I would love to reread the comic again somewhere down the road.
The next 3 animated Batman films I put on this list I have not seen, but they're the Batman Unlimited series, and Chris was telling me they're actually based on a toy line. Apparently these films are much more geared towards children. There's Animal Instincts, which came out in 2015. There's Monster Mayhem, which also came out in 2015. And then there was Mechs vs. Mutants, which came out in 2016. Now, neither Chris nor Jeremy have seen these movies, so we're going to defer to John.
They weren't really terrible. They were really just more like a kid's film than they were for like the adult animated Batman films. That's really just about it. Like I don't remember like what the stories were about. I don't remember like who were the voice actors. It was just nothing memorable. It's more of a film you watch with your kids to make time go by fast.
Now we come to Batman Bad Blood, which came out in 2016, and this is in continuity with Son of Batman and Batman vs. Robin. I saw this a few years ago, I did a review on it back in the beginning of 2017, I think, and I think I gave it a positive review, but I don't remember, because honestly, I don't really remember this movie very much. I have not seen it since I did that review. But Chris, you said you haven't seen this one yet?
I haven't seen this one.
Alright, Jeremy.
Yeah, I've seen this one. Again, it's been a while, but I remember it being alright. I thought the Batwoman was an entertaining character to watch, and, I liked the scenes, I think, where she's with her father. And, you see the father-daughter love they have for each other, which is great. And Talia al Ghul's plan to use brainwashing, that was also an interesting thing to see. But spoiler alert, I like at the end how she's like trying to tempt Bruce into, killing his own son. And Bruce is, I think, just able to manage to fight it off. That's very intense. That's a very intense scene that, well, it's good to watch.
I recently saw this finally for the first time. In the past, I would try to watch it, but then I had to turn it off because I had to go do other stuff. And you remember that scene with the Mad Hatter in the movie, or if you
Yes.
that reminded me of a little bit like Perchance to Dream It a little bit from Batman the Animated Series.
And I also want to add that I like seeing, Dick Grayson trying to be Batman. That's very entertaining to see.
That might be kind of a shout out to, at a certain point before the New 52 reboot, during Scott Snyder's run, Dick Grayson actually became Batman in the comics.
Yeah, that's right. I remember reading a few of those.
And also Batwoman was, I don't know who played the voice of her, but she was pretty good. And also I liked Batwoman the movie. And
Actually, I know that. It's Yvonne Strahovski.
Oh, yeah, right, Yvonne.
Yeah, she's actually a really good choice now that I think about it.
I don't know how to say that name, but I'll take his word for it. But yeah, she was a good choice and a good Batwoman. And it was, I agree with Jeremy. It was interesting seeing Dick Grayson being Batman, because like Christian said, that's what there's a comic book where Dick Grayson does become Batman.
And I will say that anything involving Batwoman is instantly watchable. If you ever read the J.H. Williams run, that's a pretty good character. Yeah.
Now we come to 2016's Batman the Killing Joke, based on the Alan Moore graphic novel of the same name. Now, the graphic novel, The Killing Joke, is, for me, one of the top 3 Batman stories, and there's a reason it's considered to be one of the greatest Batman stories ever written, and for a lot of people, it's the definitive Joker story. And this is an adaptation they've been talking about for years, and in this adaptation, you have Kevin Conroy coming back to play the voice of Batman, and Mark Hamill coming back to play the voice of the Joker, even though this is not in continuity with the DC animated universe. But once again, I absolutely adore the graphic novel, and I think this is easily one of their worst adaptations, I think, mainly because of the shit they added. But, Chris, we'll go to you first.
I'm kind of the definition of mixed on this one, because I think the bits that are like a straight adaptation of the comic, I think they work fine. Again, it's elevated by the fact that, you got Mark playing the Joker again, Kevin is Batman. But that first half hour, the prelude with Batgirl, it means well, but it kind of fucks things up. She's probably my favorite female superhero, and I don't like kind of the way that I hate the idea of her having a thing with Bruce. I think that's kind of gross, personally.
That's my biggest issue with this, is basically in the continuity of this movie, Barbara Gordon's whole reasoning for becoming Batgirl is because she wanted to screw Bruce Wayne. And that's actually the part of this movie that offended me the most, because honestly I found it to be borderline sexist.
That's the problem, too, because the whole idea of putting this prelude in was to give her a voice in a story that she's famously known for being the damsel in, and a lot of people kind of have issue with that. And they completely, missed the mark on that, they kind of failed miserably at trying to do the right thing.
And not to mention that, but that prologue in the beginning doesn't even remotely gel well with the Killing Joke storyline. It literally feels like 2 separate movies put together.
It's definitely a conflict of tones. Yeah, there was definitely a way that they could have gave Barbara kind of a newer voice, give her a more prominent subplot. I feel like if they'd have just extended the middle a bit, like that whole first third before she gets shot, if they'd have just made her a very prominent part of the movie, almost like, in Psycho when they kill off Marion. She's very much the movie up until that point, and then you're like, what the fuck is going to come next? If they had done a thing where it was mostly Bruce and Barbara throughout the first half, and then she gets shot by Joker, that would have worked really well. But yeah, they kind of, I don't really know what they were thinking, honestly. It's very out of left field.
The prologue was terrible. It was completely ridiculous and had absolutely nothing to do with Batman the Killing Joke. And I have a theory that it was most likely put there to appease all the feminists who complain about what happens to Barbara Gordon. And, again, I have no way of proving this, but, being that we live in sensitive times, I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out to be true. But
as I pointed out with Chris, though, I found the prologue with Barbara Gordon, I found that to be more sexist than what happens to Barbara Gordon in the story, because what happens to her is not a positive. And let's not forget that the same thing happens to Jim Gordon. Well, not the same thing, but he's also humiliated as well.
Well, no, I mean, I agree. The prologue, what it did with her was not good. I'm just saying they tried and failed. But the fact they tried, I mean, it's like, if I'm saying, I think it would have been great to include Batgirl more, but they needed to do it in the context of Batman, the Killing Joke. Coming up with this completely ridiculous plot about them going after some criminal named Paris Franz
Most phoned-in gangster name ever.
It was just, was just absolutely ridiculous, and it's just, like, why? The Killing Joke part of the film is decent, but could still use a lot of improvement.
And I will say this, the guy who wrote it is a guy named Brian Azzarello, whose stories...
Oh, yes, I love Brian Azzarello.
His stories are I'm a big fan of, but it's in terms of writing the script, it's like, dude, what was going through your head at the time?
The villain for the first 30 minutes he was like so annoying. It kind of made you think that this is what the fonts would be like if he was a Batman villain from the 60s. Like, show. Anyway, I agree with Chris. I have like 50-50. There's some things that I like and some things I don't. It's like, I don't know, it really depends. I feel like this is a film either you like or you don't like. That's the way I look at it. And also, I like the first 30 minutes. It's not that I hate it. It felt like watching a Batgirl and Batgirl film, which I would like to see one day, but just done right and done better. And I kind of agree. The sex scene with like Batgirl and Batman was like, okay, could you at least would you say that like went overboard in some ways?
A little bit. I think they meant well because they were trying to present her as like a sexual person, and they were trying to do it very casually. I think honestly they probably should have done it with Dick, because I mean Dick is the guy she traditionally has a thing with. But yeah, Bruce, having it be with Bruce was kind of a little bit misguided, I think. They meant well though, so I guess.
Plus, I do like when you see like the flashback scene of like the Joker like with his wife or Harley when he becomes the Joker and he wears the red hood and then he gets thrown into the tank of acid and then becomes the Joker, which was I thought okay. And I also like when they start like making it like the official adaptation of the Killing Joke, it kind of gets decent. I mean, not great, but it's still there's some flaws where they cut out some scenes that were in the book that were not in the movie.
Yes, I do want to say that, I mean, like I said before, the Killing Joke part of the film is decent, but it could still use a lot of improvement. I mean, the movie, it's not a complete disaster. There is some redeeming value. Yeah. Chief among them is Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, as Batman and the Joker, and they're great as always. Although, I did take issue with the way Mark Hamill said some of the graphic novel's iconic lines. Like, for example, when after Jim Gordon has been put through that horrible funhouse and, the Joker says, put him back in his cage, like that. In the graphic novel, he says, give him time to dwell on life and all its random injustice. In the graphic novel, I read that line as, he's looking down over the water, he's dark, he's gloomy, he's saying that with such a degree of, somber, because he's going to remember his own tragic past. He's, in the movie, they just, they still have him looking over the water when he say it, but it just goes, give him time to reflect on life and all its random uncontrollability. He's saying it without a care in the world. And also the fact that they changed the word injustice to uncontrollability, that was a huge mistake. It does not strike the same chord as it does in the graphic novel. And I was so disappointed because that was one of my favorite lines.
Fair enough. I mean, they could have been trying to hit different beats, though. Maybe they didn't want to emphasize that kind of thing. They were trying to emphasize it a different way. You never know. Depending on how they interpreted it themselves.
Yeah, and the other line is, when in the graphic novel, when the Joker is speaking to Batman over the intercom, and Batman's trying to fight his way through the grotesque funhouse, he says, as he's explaining, his theory on madness and how any sane person can be driven mad just by one bad day. Why can't you see the funny side? No, why aren't you laughing? It's supposed to be, why aren't you laughing? Sad and sympathetic. He's almost saying, why can't you understand me? In the movie, he says that while they're in the middle of a brutal fight, and he just goes, why aren't you laughing? And, It's not that that's a bad way to do it. It's just it does not strike the same chord because the Joker, I guess he sees Batman as an equal and he's trying to get him over to his side. That's not, in the movie, that's not the way to do it.
I actually almost feel like Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, while I think they're fantastic voice actors, I almost feel like their voices don't really fit the tone of this story. I don't know if you would agree with that or not, but you kind of touched on that a little bit.
I wouldn't say that they don't fit the tone. I just think, and with the second line I mentioned, that's not entirely Mark Hamill's fault. It's also the writer's fault for changing when the Joker says that line from, when he's still speaking with him on the intercom to, in the middle of the fight. In the middle of a nasty, violent, brutal fight, he's not going to say that, with, why aren't you laughing, with sympathy. He's gonna be vicious and angry, and I just that's not the way to do it, in my opinion.
I kind of agree. It's not that their performances are like really bad or anything. It's just because they're getting older. It's like the voices that they do. It like puts a lot of stress on their vocal cords as they get older.
I think feeling they don't fit in with the tone is more just out of familiarity with the animated series, which always it was straight, but it was always just like there was something kiddish about it at the same time. So I think it was kind of jarring for some people to see that change, where it's like, all right, we're doing like brutal murder now and much darker themes, that kind of thing. So it just felt too different for some people.
I also feel like what happened was like the reason why this didn't do so well. People were like so like excited and thrilled, like yes, we're getting the Killing Joke into an animated film, and people end up just being more like disappointed rather than being satisfied with what they saw.
And definitely, as far as Alan Moore adaptations go, this is definitely, I think, one of the worst Alan Moore adaptations.
You get why he hates like adaptations of his work now, because they always fuck it up. Like, it's ridiculous.
I can see why now.
Yeah, I mean, Alan Moore, he's officially distanced himself from any work that he does not own, and unfortunately, that does include Batman: The Killing Joke.
And it also includes Watchmen, which I think is his masterpiece.
Yeah, and also, I believe, V for Vendetta.
Yeah, that was also published by DC.
Yeah, which is a real shame, because these are some of his best stories. And I also want to add that, when people talk about things that were added to this movie, they tend to focus solely on the prologue, but really, there was a lot of stuff added to the Killing Joke portion of the film, too, that I'd like to talk about. I think a very good scene that was added to the Killing Joke portion was where Gordon is being brought through the funhouse on the little roller coaster, and it stops at this kangaroo court. All those ugly, grotesque freaks are making up the jury, and the Joker is like overseeing it, and the freaks are shouting out things like, "What do you do about a man who has no respect for the law?" And, another one goes, "Someone who treats people like meat." And, they keep going. And then Gordon is presented with this book that has the law written on it. And, he's like, if I could, I'd throw the book at him, thinking that they're talking about the Joker. And, they start chanting, "Throw the book, throw the book, throw the book." And the Joker says, "Well, what are you waiting for? Throw it!" And he throws it, and immediately a cardboard cutout of Batman comes up. And the Joker just snidely goes, "You see, Commissioner, the man on trial here you consider your friend." And I just thought that was such a perfect way to further support the fact that Batman and the Joker are very similar. Batman does break a lot of laws, although he does so for a different reason.
Bruce and Joker's psychosis, I mean, like, if you want to think of Bruce as crazy, think about it as, like, his psychosis just manifests itself in a different way from Joker. Joker is more like all-out psycho, and Batman, you can almost think of him as a sociopath, because he always knows, like, everybody. He has, like, this huge database that he just looks up everybody in, and he has all these assets that he keeps to himself, and when you break it down, it is kind of a form of psychosis, what he does. So it's debatable, but it's also interesting to think about the idea of both of them as being crazy.
That scene you brought up with the kangaroo scene, after that, like when he goes like in the ride and he sees like the pictures and the Joker singing, that was like one of the most messed up things I've ever, even like in the comic too, it's like one of the most messed up things I've ever seen in like a comic book or in a movie. It was like just so like disturbing. Imagine like if like Saw was like that, like Jigsaw did something like that in a Saw movie.
Oh, it's absolutely horrifying.
It is.
I mean, reading it in the graphic novel, it's horrifying. Seeing it in the movie, it's horrifying. It's demented. It's terrifying.
It is.
This poor man is being forced to ride this horrible, demented, deranged fun ride in a fun house surrounded by pictures of his naked daughter who's also been shot. And the Joker and all these other grotesque freaks are taking absolute joy in watching him suffer. it's horrible. And that reminds me of another thing I wanted to point out. I just love the shot where Commissioner Gordon is first brought to the carnival, and these deformed little people are, they're ripping off his clothes and attach a collar to him, and then one of them just goes, "Up, up!" They're treating him like a dog. They're like dragging him around him, and you see the shot of all the other freaks. You see their ugly faces, and they're just leering and laughing at him, and it's just, you feel Commissioner Gordon's terror. And of course, then he goes down. Just forces him down. It's like, you'd almost say he's forcing him to sort of bow to the Joker in a way. You know what I mean?
Something I want to bring up, and this more goes to the comic, so this is more stuff you could credit the comic for, is I just love how the origin you get for the Joker in the comic and in this movie, you're not really sure if that's really how it all went down. You're not really sure if that's really the Joker's origin, because he has that great line, "If I were to have a past, I prefer it to be multiple choice."
That was a really good way of Alan being able to preserve kind of the mystique of him, but at the same time also giving him, okay, here's how it might have happened.
Yeah.
So it kind of preserves him as this sort of like icon of chaos, despite the fact that they are trying to delve into what might have caused him to go nuts.
I kind of take it as the Joker's trying to justify, at least to himself, why he does what he does. So, because I personally don't believe the Joker really remembers where he came from, and I kind of interpret it as that's just a story he made up to justify his own actions.
I don't know if you remember, we once had a conversation about even the Joker himself, even he himself does not know who he is or where he comes from or what made him the Joker.
I want to mention that the Joker singing "I Go Loony" is a definite highlight of the movie. That scene is very well done, I think.
You can tell Mark Hamill's really enjoying himself with his singing.
Well, I think Mark Hamill was a huge fan of the graphic novel, because I think he said that this was the only way he was really going to come back as the Joker, is if they adapt Killing Joke.
His initial idea was just to do it as like a book on tape, but then they switched it up and they're like, no, we'll just do it as a feature. And I guess he went along with it, because the big thing he was against was if it had been done like any way that changed Alan's book, and he knew that like Alan was not okay with people like messing around with his stories. So I think the fact that they just pitched it to him as like a more or less straight adaptation, that's like why he went for it.
Yeah. It's just a shame that this ended up being not a very good adaptation of the story. Yeah.
It's my hope that maybe someday they'll try again, and this time do it properly.
Kind of like what they did with Death of Superman, because I know they did an adaptation of that years ago, and now they recently did another one.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I mean. Like, that's similar,
Also, Mark Hamill said he's been on and off with retiring from the Joker because that puts a lot of stress on his vocal cords, but despite this, he said he wanted this to be his last time being the Joker, but he said he may want to do maybe the Joker a few more times in a few different Joker animated films with Batman.
I think it's going to be just whenever he wants to stop doing it, because he said Arkham City was going to be the last time.
Yeah.
He did it, and then he just did it another 3 times after that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. A few more things I want to mention. First is I also love the added scene where Batman's kind of trying to find out the whereabouts of the Joker, and he goes to this club that's populated by criminals, and he goes to one of the head honchos, and the guy tells him, "Look, we may be scared of you, but we're terrified of him." I thought that was very effective. And I must also say, Kevin Conroy, he continues to do great work here, and I just love the ending scene where, the Joker, gives in to him, and, says, come on, get your standing ovation already. And Kevin Conroy's Batman, goes, "No, I don't want to kill you." He's just telling him, "I want to help you, because I don't want us to kill each other." And I think he delivers this line, "You don't need to be alone." I think he does a very good job with that. He brings a lot of emotion into it. These two have been fighting for so long, that, Batman's just sick and tired of it. I think he puts a lot of that into his performance. And, that scene itself, I think, is one of the film's saving graces. That scene gets very emotional and very, you feel empathy for the two of them, because they are locked onto this dead set course of destruction.
The way I kind of interpret it is, I think their relationship is almost like a personal hell neither one of them can get out of.
Yeah, that's right. I totally agree with that.
I'm glad you talked about that line at the end, it's far too late for that, because that was always the one that affected me so much that even he's cognizant enough to know that he's beyond crazy. But something that I don't know if we really harped on is there's a lot of debate about what happens in that final shot.
Yeah.
where like the ring
Yeah.
goes back down. A lot of people think that like Batman snaps the Joker's neck, or that like they're just gonna agree to continue doing what they're doing.
Well, that's the thing about it, is like that's why I feel like this would work if it's set in its own continuity, but
Exactly.
because the comic is canon with the whole continuity, that's where it's like, okay, that the rest of every other Batman comic that's come after this in some ways has kind of ruined this one.
True, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of like somewhat of a fan of the idea that maybe he kills the Joker at the end, because that's like him snapping himself, and it's almost like
And proving the Joker right.
exactly, yeah, like through sort of like a Pyrrhic victory almost, yeah, it's a scary idea. I like that.
I mean, I never saw it as Batman killing the Joker, but nevertheless, that is a pretty cool idea. Interesting idea that maybe Batman finally snapped.
Yeah.
But I never saw it as that way. Plus, the fact that the graphic novel is in continuity with the mainstream comics proves that he didn't kill him. Again, the movie does have saving a lot of redeeming value, as I said. The ending scene, I guess, is one of them. Mark Hamill singing, "I Go Loony" is another. And, the Killing Joke part of the movie is decent for the most part, just could have been better.
Like, I understand the filler because the graphic novel isn't that long. Adapting it properly, you would only get like a 25-minute long movie.
And again,
so.
as I said, I was never opposed to giving Batgirl, more to do than just get shot. I just think they did it in such a terrible way.
Yeah, no, like, they added to the wrong thing.
And also, I remember when this movie was first announced, it said that the prologue, there was only going to be a 15-minute prologue, not an almost half-hour one. And I immediately thought at the time, oh, wow, that's probably going to be an extra Joker flashback. That'd be great.
That'd be sick.
It would probably have been him at the comedy club and him trying to tell a joke and the audience, booing him. That would fit so perfectly,
cool.
and they squandered that opportunity completely.
An idea that I had, just like shooting in the dark, was in black and white. There was this story. I think Neil Gaiman wrote it, where Batman and the Joker, it's this weird like meta narrative where the two of them very briefly step out of character and like talk to each other almost as though they're actors playing parts, and then they kind of come to the mutual agreement that they're probably never going to stop playing these roles, and they kind of step back into it at the end of the story, and everything keeps going. And I thought, if you wanted to do like a legit like short movie to open this, that would have been really good to like interlude, because it's all about the relationship between the two of them.
Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore, those guys they're really good at just breaking this shit down and like pointing out the absurdities of these stories, but also like still telling really good stories in this continuity and stuff.
Like reveling in the absurdity. Yeah.
Like, I absolutely adore Neil Gaiman's Sandman series, which is part of the DC continuity.
Right.
Yeah, as I said before, I think it's such a shame that Alan Moore does not like this story. I mean, he's entitled to his own opinion, especially when it's about his own work, but, I think he kind of disregards the fact that a lot of people do love and enjoy this story, and, it's like, kind of disheartening to see its author kind of bash it so fervently, so passionately, I should say.
I did hear he said once that, I don't like it, but for a Batman story, it's pretty good.
I feel like Alan Moore is like such a great like comic book writer that he just really does not like give him like much credit for like all the work he's done, like Watchmen, V for Vendetta, and this is like one of his like best Batman comics I've ever read, and one of his best stories I've ever read of his.
I get where he's coming from though, because I mean he feels like this story is more just straightforward about like a bunch of licensed characters kind of doing their thing, and it doesn't really say anything interesting.
Right.
But there's broader themes though about like insanity and morality, that kind of thing. So he does kind of second guess it for silly reasons, but I get where he's coming from, because he does very heady stories, that are very much about like humanity and stuff. So
when I read Watchmen for the first time, I couldn't believe like all the topics and also like some of like the plot of it. The story was just like. It's probably like the first time I ever saw like stuff in a comic I never would have imagined they would put in comic books like that.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up something John said earlier about Mark Hamill, kind of having trouble doing the voice. I think that might be true, but it's also, I think the way the Joker's voice is now, it fits perfectly with this story because, as I said before, Batman and the Joker in this continuity have been fighting for so long that, you'd expect them to be a little older, a little more weary, shall we say. And it's always still enjoyable to watch. I also just love the first scene we see the Joker, he and the guy he's buying the carnival from are just walking around, and the Joker's describing all these disgusting things about the carnival, and he just goes, "Oh, I'm a connoisseur of eau de toilette." It's just great. And of course, that scene where he, spoiler alert, kills the guy by shaking his hand, and he has the little hand injector thing with the poison, that I think was suitably creepy and scary.
Here's an honest question to all three of you. If you were to watch it again, like if you were in the specific mood, would you like skip the first 30 minutes of the Batgirl and just head like straight to the Killing Joke story?
Oh, I always skip the prologue every single time I watch a Batman: The Killing Joke. I mean, the only time I ever watched the prologue was the very first time I saw this movie back in 2016, and after I was done, I said, never again.
Actually, I do I do give it a rewatch every time because I love that character, Batgirl. I like that she became a focal point for that part of the movie. It just annoys me that it was done clumsily. It sucks.
And we forgot to mention her gay best friend.
Oh, yeah.
The dude that works with her at the library. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, that's right. The problem with that is that then you're going into Sex and the City territory where, she has a relationship, she has a gay best friend. It's all these weird, romance movie tropes that feel, random. It feels like cobbled together is the problem.
It's, at the end of the day, this is Batman and the Joker's movie. I mean, like I said before, if they wanted to give Batgirl more screen time and have her more involved, I was all for it. But, it almost, with this prologue, it almost feels like they're trying to have her hijack the entire thing.
This is not really a film I really hate. It's just a film that I was hoping for better, great, but it just didn't really win me over in the end. That's all I got to say about it.
Yeah, and I think the movie sucks, personally. I'm a huge fan of the graphic novel. This was not the adaptation this story deserved.
Yeah, I mean, I love the graphic novel so much. I've read it countless times, so I was so excited for this movie, and in all honesty, it was kind of a letdown, despite the redeeming value.
I admit, I'd rather read the graphic novel instead of watching the movie.
Now we come to 2016's Batman: Return of the Caped Crusaders, which is basically, I guess you could say, sort of a tribute to the Adam West Batman, and Adam West and Burt Ward actually come back to reprise their roles as Batman and Robin. You could say that maybe this is in continuity with that old series, but I'm not really sure if that old series had any continuity to begin with. I have not seen this movie, so honestly, I defer. Have you seen this, Chris? Alright, Chris hasn't seen it. Have you seen it?
I have seen it.
What do you think of this?
I like it. It's a nice little homage to the 60s show, and it's great that they got Adam West and Burt Ward and Julie Newmar to return to their iconic roles as Batman, Robin, and Catwoman. So yeah, it's very enjoyable.
Sorry to disappoint you, but it sucked.
Okay, that's John's opinion. Once again, I really can't comment on it because I have not seen it yet.
I mean, I get it, yes, it's a tribute to the show, which I understand. People grew up in the 60s watching the show, and that's fine. But for me, I'm just not a 60s I mean, I do love a lot of 60s movie and show that came out in the 60s, but this is just not one of my favorite of 60s shows.
But any more thoughts on this, Jeremy?
I mean, just that it's a lot of fun, and as I said, great to see Adam West, Burt Ward, and Julie Newmar back at it again.
Alright. Now, during the recording of this retrospective, we forgot to talk about the Lego Batman movie. So, I don't know what the other guys think of this movie or if they've seen this, but I personally like the Lego Batman movie a lot, but if you want to know more of my thoughts on this movie, I did do a review on it last year when I did these Batman reviews. Now we come to 2017's Batman and Harley Quinn. This one's interesting because it seems to be in the same continuity as Batman the Animated Series, but it would be weird if this is in continuity with that, because that was a kid's show, and there's a lot of sexual humor in this movie and sexual situations, and this one's definitely a straight comedy. Yeah, I thought it was decent, but Jeremy, what do you think of this one?
It's not my favorite Batman movie, but I mean, it's really lighthearted, and, parts of it are funny and a lot of fun, so, I say give it a watch. I definitely like the parts where, I think Batman's trying to get Harley Quinn to, help him defeat Poison Ivy, and something that Harley says just causes him to go, "Oh, we're doomed." And I also love when Batman just says to Harley, "I can't rely on you. You might go crazy all because today's Tuesday." And I mean, yeah, it's not a perfect film. I definitely thought the ending was a little, it was too much of a punchline in a way.
Yeah.
But, it's got some redeeming value, so I say check it out.
Do you think this could be in continuity with the animated series?
That's tough to say. Maybe, maybe not. I really can't say for sure.
All right.
I only saw this once, and that was just it for me. I mean, it wasn't really horrible. I just it's not really what I was expecting. I was expecting this, because it was Bruce Timm, Paul Dini. I'm like, yes, this is gonna be I was expecting something good from them, like I always do. But it just this film, they this is the first time Paul Dini and Bruce Timm really let me down rather than impress me. And the actress who plays Bernard on Big Bang Theory, what's her name? Melissa Ross was an okay Harley Quinn, but I'm not really in a rush to see her again as Harley Quinn in the future. And again, I like the animation. I also like the feel, the atmosphere, how it feels like the animated show, but it was just not the same like it was in the 90s and other Batman animated films I've seen from Bruce Timm and Paul Dini. Yep, not a fan of this movie.
The one thing I will say is I do think it's interesting how it's a Harley Quinn movie without the Joker. At this point, I think most people understand that this character can stand on her own, I think.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. She's a great character. And I think Melissa Rauch does an okay job. I like the scene where she's working at the diner or bar or whatever it is, and some guy's trying to get a little too hands-on with her, and she just goes, "You're gonna lose that hand, mister."
I thought that was kind of funny and just very interesting that they actually added that in the movie. Like you said, it has a lot of sexual. I mean, it's not that I wasn't bothered with that. I just think it was just maybe not necessarily. I don't know. Maybe it was just me. I guess I don't know. And
I wasn't really bothered by it, but my issue was only that if this is in continuity with that's meant for kids, and now you have this. But granted, I think Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, they know that all the people who grew up with that are now adults, so maybe that's why this is so adult-oriented.
Yeah, I could see why, because I grew up. We all grew up with the animated show, and now this is an adult-oriented Batman the Animated Series episode.
Now, one of the main villains of this film is the Four Roenick Man, who fans of Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing might recognize as the main villain of the first story arc of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. And Swamp Thing actually does make an appearance at the end of this movie. But in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, the Four Roenick Man is a scary motherfucker. But in this movie, he's kind of goofy. What he's doing is scary, but at the same time, though, the character is definitely played up for laughs in this movie. Now, granted, I understand that Alan Moore did not originally create this character, and I don't know what the original incarnation of this character is like, but it's a little jarring if you've read Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, and you see how scary this character is in that. It might be a little jarring seeing him here, where he's definitely played up more for laughs.
Well, it suits the movie's tone, which is very goofy and comedic.
I will say his comeuppance at the end was freaking hilarious.
Yeah, it was. Yes, Christian, I agree. The ending with Four Roenick Man is hilarious, as he's just going, ouch, 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 and he's on fire. I just wish there would have been a bit more after that.
Do you remember that episode in the animated series, Harley's Holiday?
Yeah.
That kind of reminded me of that a little bit in some ways of this movie, but just done different though.
Alright.
Yeah, just a little comparison, that's all.
Yeah, I remember that episode, John.
Next is Batman vs. Two-Face, which, like Return of the Caped Crusaders, is a tribute to the Adam West Batman show, and this features the voice of William Shatner as Two-Face. I have not seen this movie, so I defer.
I've seen the movie, and I'll be honest, I didn't care for it quite so much, just because I was really hoping they would use the storyline they had originally written for the 60s show, where Two-Face is this TV anchorman, and his face gets disfigured when, the television set blows up in his face. I was very disappointed that they didn't use that. But, I mean, what they had was okay, I guess. I just didn't really care for it that much.
I mean, Greg, I give them credit that if they did use Two-Face in the 60s show, Shatter could have been a good addition to playing Two-Face, but just like the same thoughts of Cape Crusaders, again, I don't like this film at all. It's just the same as the first one. The cheesy, lame, yeah. Sorry, not a fan.
Yeah, and even though I haven't seen this, I personally don't like the idea of Two-Face, who is my favorite Batman villain, being in a more comedic story. That's one of the reasons why I hate Batman Forever so much, is you have such a comedic Two-Face in that, and they made him such a goofball in that, and I prefer Two-Face stories to be darker, more serious.
I just want to add that it was actually the last time Adam West ever played Batman, because he sadly passed away a few months before its release. So, it's definitely nice because there is a tribute to him in the credits, so it's still worth a watch.
And you haven't seen this one, right? Alright. Now, in 2018, you had Scooby-Doo and Batman the Brave and the Bold, which was part of the Scooby-Doo franchise, but was also a spin-off of the TV series Batman the Brave and the Bold, which I've never watched, but to my knowledge, I think it's very polarizing among a lot of Batman fans, because it's a lot more child-oriented, and it's a lot more comedy-oriented. I've also never seen this movie, and neither have the other guys, but there was actually already a Scooby-Doo and Batman crossover in the 70s. There were actually 2 episodes of the TV show The New Scooby-Doo Movies, where Scooby-Doo and the rest of the Mystery Gang met Batman and Robin and the Joker and Penguin. And I actually really do love those 2 Scooby-Doo episodes, but I haven't seen them since I was a little kid. But once again, I have not seen this movie yet. Now we come to Batman Gotham by Gaslight, which is based on a 1989 Elseworld graphic novel of the same name by Brian Augustyn. For those of you who don't know what Elseworlds are, it's something that DC does where it's basically what-if stories, where there's stories that are specifically set outside of the mainstream continuity, and they do radically different things with the characters. For example, there's an Elseworld Superman story called Red Sun, where it's basically, what if instead of landed in Kansas, Clark Kent landed in Soviet Russia? And there's also an Elseworld Batman graphic novel where he fights Dracula and then becomes a vampire. And basically the whole premise of Gotham by Gaslight is, what if Batman lived during the time of Jack the Ripper, and what if instead of terrorizing London in the 19th century, Jack the Ripper was terrorizing Gotham City? And what if Batman and Jack the Ripper existed at the same time? That's the basic premise of the graphic novel, and that's also the premise of the movie. But Gotham by Gaslight, Chris, what do you think of this one?
This was a really pleasant surprise, because I hadn't read the graphic novel, and the 3 of us, just like a week or 2 back, we all watched it, and I really liked it, because it's such a cool idea, to do that. Like, all right, let's put him up against Jack the Ripper, this like historical figure. So you have like that cool, like somewhere between fiction and history thing going on. And the thing I liked was it almost kind of echoed From Hell to some degree, because like they portray him as like a hardcore misogynist and like all this crazy shit that's going on. And then on top of that, you just get the cool kind of like Easter eggs that come from seeing these characters reinterpreted for the Victorian era. So, like, if you figure out, like, okay, that's Dick, that's Jason, you see, like, all these different characters messing around. So, it's a really fun concept, and I really can't wait to check out the graphic novel, especially since it's drawn by Mike Mignola.
Yeah, I really like this one, too, and I also have not read the graphic novel. But, yeah, it's very interesting to see what Batman would be like if he lived during the 1800s. And it's also real cool to see him go up against Jack the Ripper. But, yeah, I mean, I think this is a great entry in the series of Batman animated movies.
I think it's a great original idea, like something different where, like, instead of, like, the traditional, like, Batman, like, in modern day, you, like, go back to, like, Victorian era and see, like, dealing with Jack the Ripper, and I think it was also, like, it was a really great idea. It's something I never would have expected to see in a Batman, like, comic and movie. Well, I mean, I've read the comic, and I hope one day, like, down the road, I'll get the chance to read the comic to see, like, how great it is. And also, Bruce Greenwood, great to see him back as Batman again.
And what do you guys think of Selina Kyle in this? What do you think of this new version of Selina Kyle?
I thought it worked really well. And the great thing is she's voiced by Jennifer Carpenter.
Yeah.
And she actually gets so into it, I didn't recognize her voice at all. But I really enjoyed that she becomes almost a huge fixture of the story, and now like you've seen all these stories coming out that are all about like the relationship between Bruce and Selina and all the different interpretations you can do of it. It's a big part of what's going on in the comics right now. It's a big part of like Gotham, and it's a big part of this, obviously. So I like that people are really starting to like reinterpret it from all these different avenues.
Yeah, I think she's great. She's definitely tough as nails. She can definitely fend for herself. She can handle herself, which is great to see.
Not a damsel in distress.
And what I liked about Selina Kyle in this is there's definitely an emphasis on like feminism with this. Given the time, this was a time when women were barely even thought of as people back then. Right. So the fact that you have her being like a feminist at this time makes a lot of sense, and also given that it's mostly women who are killed by Jack the Ripper, like I feel like that really does fit the themes that they're going for in this movie.
Something actually I wanted to point out, now you're talking about like how she's a great, like strong female character. Kind of the flip side to that is Barbara, who the big twist turns out to be that Gordon is Jack the Ripper. And Barbara is kind of almost like she's like monkey slave to some degree. She's almost like mindless and just believes in his like misogynist views and that everybody needs to be purged, and she's a part of that. It's very frightening, that moment when Bruce realizes everything that's going on. You see like the burns on her face and stuff like that.
Actually, it seems like they tried to make Barbara almost an interpretation of Two-Face in a way in this.
I think you're right. Yeah, that's a really cool way of looking at it.
Because there was sort of that like red herring where you think Harvey Dent, like this continuity's version of Harvey Dent, was going to end up being Jack the Ripper, and then you find out it was actually Jim Gordon.
And it's a great twist, because Gordon always represents everything that's good about Gotham, and then to kind of sort of reflect what went on in Victorian times, the fact that everything was corrupt and was always about fucking people over, and classism was a big problem. I think it makes sense to do that twist because like Gordon is the one kind of in charge of everything, and it turns out that he's the one that's instigating all this. So it makes a lot of sense when you switch up the two time periods to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Gordon being Jack the Ripper was a fantastic twist. Throughout the movie, I thought it was going to be Harvey Dent because Harvey Dent's kind of portrayed as kind of a douchebag in this movie. So it made sense that he would wind up being Jack the Ripper. But, making it Gordon, who's supposed to be this, purveyor of law and order and justice, that was very well done. And when the big twist is revealed, Gordon does a complete 180 from being this respectable lawman to just being absolutely terrifying.
I was like shocked and did not see it coming that Jim Gordon was Jack the Ripper, because at first I'm thinking maybe it's going to be like the Joker as a surprise, but no, it was Jim Gordon. I'm like, whoa. It was probably like the first time I ever like rooted against Gordon, because I love Commissioner Gordon in the Batman comics. He's like one of my favorite characters in Batman comics.
Once again, I think it's a very well done movie. I do like you basically get introduced to the three Robins of this continuity, and their way of coming into the story is really interesting. Now, I want to point out that the whole twist ending of Jim Gordon being Jack the Ripper, that was not in the graphic novel at all. Now, this is a major spoiler if you haven't read the graphic novel, but since we already spoiled the movie's ending, I might as well spoil the graphic novel's ending as well. But in the graphic novel, you find out that Jack the Ripper was actually a friend of the Wayne family who actually had Bruce's parents murdered. Now, the next animated Batman film was 2018's Batman Ninja, which was sort of an anime-inspired, ninja-themed Batman film. None of us have seen that movie, so we're not going to talk about it, but I did want to mention it, and I do apologize for anybody watching this video who was hoping that we would talk about this one. Before we end this, any closing thoughts on the animated Batman franchise?
I'd say right now the golden three is Under the Red Hood, Dark Knight Returns, and Gotham by Gaslight. I think those are like the top three right now. Those are just like my personal recommendation.
All right, I would personally throw like Mask of the Phantasm.
Yeah. I'd say Red Hood just edges it out for me.
All right,
I definitely would bring that one up if it had been for Red Hood.
Yeah, I love so many of the Batman animated movies, and yeah, my top ones are definitely The Dark Knight Returns, Batman, Mask of the Phantasm, Batman Under the Red Hood. So yeah, I mean, and as I said before, Killing Joke was a letdown, but I still find redeeming value in it, so I still enjoy it.
I love these like animated films. They're like one of my favorite of like animated films and films of all time. Like if I had to like pick like the top ones I recommend are Master of the Phantasm, Sub-Zero, and Batman, Superman, Public Enemies, and Apocalypse. Year One, The Dark Knight Returns, and as I've always recommended these podcasts, just watch them all and decide which ones you like and just give your own thoughts on what you felt about these movies.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed this animated Batman retrospective. If you didn't, I'm sorry. And stop doing it. Okay.
Sorry.
Now we come to 2000.
Sorry.
Are you done?
You can restart again. It's all good.
Okay, now I'm done.
Yeah.
You should make a bloopers out of this.
Yeah, you should.
I should.
That was a good one.
All right.